Ready?
Hit it!
Hello everyone and welcome to Twice Nightly the podcast with Maria Lovelady
And Michael Allen Bailey, a podcast that aims to bring everything variety out of the wings and into the limelight.
So what are we waiting for?
Let's raise the curtain
And start the show!
Coming up on today's episode, we talk to theatre producer Michael Harrison.
We talk to Michael about all things show business from the Palladium to Panto to Pinocchio.
And find out which iconic variety performers Michael has greeting him in his home.
You make it sound like he's got Debbie McGee waiting for him with a coffee when he comes in.
Just falls out of a box in the splits with an espresso.
You'll like this, not a lot. Welcome back, everybody, and today we have got a very, very special guest for you. Not only is this man one of the top producers in the whole of the UK, he is also the top pantomime producer in the world, the actual world, the whole world. Think of all the pantos that go on in the world. Well, this man is the best at all of them. It is the one and only Michael Harrison.
Now, as listeners of the Twice Nightly Theatre podcast, there is no way you have gone through your life without seeing a show produced by Michael Harrison. Currently, he has on Starlight Express, Hello Dolly, The Wizard of Oz. Of course, everyone's heard of the Olivier-winning Sunset Boulevard, which is transferring to Broadway. And he's got Warhorse coming up, and the iconic Palladium Panto this year is Robin Hood.
I am so excited about that Robin Hood panto. That is going to be so good because it's an unusual choice, isn't it, Robin Hood?
It is, because normally you go with those big sort of Cinderellas, Snow Whites, but that isn't the reason you're interested. The reason you're interested in it is because it's Jane McDonald. Let's just put it out there right now. And we should tell everybody, if we've not already, about the time that we went to see Jane McDonald.
And Maria bought a Jane McDonald sewing kit from the merchandise stand.
I did, because I saw one and I thought, I can't believe that they even exist. And I don't have a sewing kit. And if you're going to have a sewing kit, why should it not be a Jane McDonald one?
Have you still got it?
I don't think I have, I've got no idea where it is, but I did have it.
You wouldn't have thrown it out. Nobody would throw out a Jane McDonald sewing kit.
No, but I think it was when we were at uni, wasn't it? So I think it's
a very long time ago.
Yeah, it's probably just got lost. I probably used all the threads.
Well, I think that the merchandise people at the London Palladium are missing a trick if they don't do a Jane McDonald as-made Marion sewing kit.
You can sew all your thigh-high boots and
sew all your
tights and tunics. That'll be good, won't it? Seeing Jane McDonald in some tights and tunics.
Well, you've just reminded me, you've just mentioned Starlight Express. I was actually listening the other day to a Desert Island Discs episode of Arlene Phillips. Lovely Arlene Phillips talking about choreographing Starlight Express. And I don't know whether have we mentioned to the listeners that we're both now this weird Desert Island Discs fanatics.
Well, we love it, don't we? I don't think it's a surprise, because Desert Island Discs in its own way is almost the original podcast, I think.
But when we were on tour last time, it got us through the long journeys, didn't it? Desert Island Discs literally was our touring companion.
And we listened to everybody, didn't we? Who were we listening to?
Oh, God, we listened to Helen Mirren. We listened to Barry Humphries, Paul O'Grady, Sheila Hancock. Did we listen to Joan Collins?
Of course we listened to Joan Collins.
Yeah, we did, didn't we? Judi Dench, Miriam Margolyes. We listened to everyone. The list is endless. And if you do, I tell you what, I won't read any more names of the people that we listen to. Just imagine the campus person you can, and we probably listen to them. But it got me thinking, because Desert Island Discs is kind of like something that I've really gotten into lately. Maybe it's a sign of age, I don't know. But I love it. I absolutely love it. And another thing that I've really gotten into lately, again showing me age, and again, like, thank the Lord for YouTube, is What's My Line? I have been watching old episodes of What's My Line, but the original 50s series, the American one, and I absolutely am obsessed with it. It is so addictive. How much do you know of What's My Line?
Well, I didn't know too much about it. I'd heard of it, but I didn't know too much about it. But then, of course, we watched the Hedy Lamarr because I'm such a Hedy Lamarr fan. So
Yes.
we watched the Hedy Lamarr episode together, and it was brilliant. And I loved that they got who she was from who she was married to, rather than the work that she'd done
How typical is that, though, of that time?
of that period. Absolutely.
But that's what they do every week. They have a special mystery guest on and they blindfold the panel, and the panel have to ask them questions. And because it's from the 50s and it's America, they have the best people like Gloria Swanson and Joan Crawford and Betty Davis and Bob Hope and everyone who's everyone. And sometimes they get people on that maybe you don't that maybe weren't sort of archived as well back in those days. You know, back in the days where there weren't that many like television interviews, or, you know, maybe interviews were just printed or written down. It's so interesting to see some of these people in person and sort of having fun, if that makes sense. You know, people like Charles Lawton, who you think
Hmm.
is a really serious actor, and there he is on What's My Line. So it's a great kind of archive for stuff like that. But it got me thinking, right? With the back catalogue of variety acts that there have been over the years, I was thinking I should challenge you to a game of What's My Variety Line?
That's a good idea because we do this all the time, don't we? So, for example, we talk about the Palladium in this episode. And for those of you that have been to the Palladium, particularly the Bar Parnell bar, that has just got the old variety posters with all the names of the people that performed at the Palladium. And you look at them now and they're just names, aren't they? And we often think, I wonder what they did. I wonder who they were and where they came from. So this is a fantastic idea. But I feel like I'm not going to be very good at it because I look at things and go, what a name. Surely they were a magician. And it turns out they were like, I don't know, a contortionist or something, or an elephant. I've never got a clue.
Well, that's the beauty of the game, is that they literally could be anything, because this is a time when anyone could be anything. Right. Okay. So I've got the name of an act for you. Okay.
Okay, okay,
I'll
okay.
give you the year as well that they performed on the Palladium. This is an act that was on the Palladium, by the way.
Oh, right.
Kind of,
Okay, that's great because Michael Harrison has such an affinity with the Palladium, and you'll hear that in this interview. And I've never really heard anybody talk about such love about a building before. So please stay tuned and listen to that in the interview because it really, really makes you feel like we're part of a community of theatre lovers and theatre goers. And it's really nice to know that the people who are looking after these buildings love them as much as we do.
yeah, absolutely. It's great to know that there's a passion behind it all, isn't there? Right. Okay. So digging around in the Palladium archives, I found the name of an act. So all I'm going to do is give you the name, and you've got to guess what they did. Listeners at home, you can play along with this as well, because I don't imagine Maria's going to get it in one.
I might just edit it so it sounds like I got it in 20 seconds when really we're going to sit here for 20 minutes.
This act performed at the Palladium in 1957, and their name was the Three Britons. What did the Three Britons do? I'll give you one more clue. They weren't British.
Okay. Because I was going to go down a completely different line and say, okay, what are Brits famous for? Which
Yeah,
really, we don't want to go down that line at all, do we?
no, we certainly don't. That could be a dangerous rabbit hole, couldn't it? So the Three Britons, what was their act?
They weren't British. Hmm.
Not that that sort of has anything to do with what they did.
Okay. Because I was going to say, were they impressionists? Did they do impressions of Brits?
No. Just off the record. Am I giving you like what, three guesses?
Yeah, but I've not guessed yet. I've not guessed.
Okay.
Okay, the Three Britons. Okay, so there's three of them. So there's some kind of troupe. So I'm thinking like they've got an act together where maybe they do something in unison or some choreography. The Three Britons. It doesn't sound pizzazzy enough to be a magician. So I'm going to
So this is
rule
what they
those
do
out.
on What's My Line. You can ask me questions, but I can only answer yes or no.
Okay, okay, okay. So you are one of the Three Britons.
Mm.
Okay. Do you use your voice?
No.
Do you use a prop?
Yes.
Do you use a mode of transport?
Yes.
Okay. So can I guess now? But that's just one guess.
Yeah, go on.
Are you a unicyclist?
No.
Okay. Is your mode of transport alive?
No.
Okay. Do you parachute from the ceiling?
No.
1954.
57.
This is so hard.
You were on the right lines with you were closer with unicycling than you were with parachuting.
I feel like everyone listening is like shouting out what they think.
Yeah.
Do you use a pogo stick?
No.
Are they more 60s? Okay, I'm just gonna start guessing.
Okay.
Are you in a synchronized cycling team?
Yes. The three Britons were Australia's trick cyclists.
Wow, I can't believe I got that.
I can't believe you got that, and you actually didn't have that many guesses, really.
So go on, tell me what did they do? Tell me more about them. Why did they call themselves the Three Britons?
Well, this I have no idea.
Great. Well,
I don't know.
Go, guys. You need to get in touch if you know anything about the Three Britons. Tell us. I bet Michael Harrison knows all about the Three Britons because Michael Harrison is an encyclopedia on variety theatre. We have spoken to so many people up and down the country, outside of the country, about variety theatre. And I think that Michael Harrison has to be up there as the number one buff. Buff? Is that what you say?
Buff, yeah.
A buff. Sounds a bit rude. Sounds a bit naughty.
What he doesn't know isn't worth knowing.
And what I loved in this interview is he says, if you don't know, ask. And I think that is a really great motto for life, actually. And I think that's what we're doing here on the Twice Nightly Theatre podcast. If we don't know something, we ask.
Well, that's a theme that's sort of recurring, isn't it, with people that we're speaking to, especially lately. I feel like a lot of guests that we've talked to have really talked about the curiosity factor and asking questions and about how, I mean, we've said it ourselves that we are students, essentially. We're not experts, we're students and we're learning all the time. And that's part of the joy. And that really, there's never a time where we're not students. We're always learning.
I think if you keep that attitude through life, you're in a good place. So this episode took place in Michael's office in Covent Garden, and it was a beautiful office filled with Mike got distracted so many times with all of the fantastic projects that Michael has been involved with over the course of his career.
I was like a show business magpie.
But there was one object in Michael's office that really caught Mike's eye, and it stayed with us after the interview had finished and after we'd left Michael's office and went for lunch in Covent Garden. I'm not going to tell you what that is. You're going to have to stay tuned and listen to the very end of the interview to find out.
Now, we're actually starting this interview mid-conversation because Michael wasn't only generous enough to chat to us about his life and career in show business, but he also found time to pay tribute to one of his favourite variety performers, the legendary, late, great Sir Ken Dodd. And that part of Michael's interview is going to be featured in our next episode in collaboration with the Ken Dodd Charitable Foundation, where we and previous guests pay tribute to the late, great variety giant, Sir Ken Dodd.
So here he is, Michael Harrison. As a producer of pantomime, if you could get Ken sort of in his heyday and he said, cast me, Michael, put me anywhere, what would you do with him?
Well, funny enough, I don't think pantomime was Ken's natural home.
Right.
And I think he might have said this himself. I think he enjoyed doing pantomime. But if you look at it, he didn't do it every year. Mm-hmm. He was happier actually doing a Ken Dodd Christmas happiness show in the Philharmonic Hall or whatever in Liverpool than doing pantomime, because in pantomime you've kind of set to a structure and you don't want to stand there doing long spots. And he did some very successful pantomimes. Manchester Palace, he did a Big Dick Whittington, Sinbad the Sailor in Wimbledon. He did a Mother Goose. But it wasn't kind of one of those performers that, we all know that, goes and does it every year. He never played the Palladium in pantomime. Yeah. Look, I would have loved to have worked with him. Although would I have loved to have worked with him? Because I'm not sure you should. I think that's the great thing about your heroes, that, if you work with everybody, it's like I say, before I came to London was a magical place. Now it's just where you live.
Yeah.
And it's the same as New York. If you go, would you like to live in New York? Well, I love going to live to New York, but if I went to live there, it'd become probably a bit boring. And that's the same as, your heroes, that if you work with them, then they just become your mate or your colleague or, somebody that you go, oh God, I've got to go and deal with that. I like the magic of, he was just Ken Dodge to me. I was just a fan.
Yeah.
I was just one of 1,000 people sitting in the audience.
Yeah.
It just happened to be that I, watched him many, many times. One of the first things I do when I wake up in the morning, I'll go onto YouTube, I'll put his name in, I'll find a clip. I remember the day of Prince Philip's funeral. Everybody in my house was in one room watching the funeral, and I was in another room, and I put on my Ken Dodd Live Laughter Tour video, and I watched it, and my little boy was doing something later at school, and somebody says, did you all watch the funeral? He says, no, we didn't, because my daddy was watching Ken Dodd. Was watching Ken Dodd on a DVD, and he said, don't worry, he went, my dad's weird.
I think it's what Prince Philip would have wanted.
I think it is what Prince Philip would have wanted.
Well, you've just mentioned there that you're one of 1,000 people in the audience, but now you are definitely not one of 1,000 people in the audience. You are the person that brings the audience to the theatre. And as you said, Ken was all about happiness, about escapism, and that's what you're creating. So we would love to talk to you about you and about how you started, but mainly how variety was the way in for you. You said when you were a boy you were always watching the good old days and things like that.
I'm picking up on the fact that you just said that, when I thought about being a producer when I was a kid, that's quite an unusual thing for a kid to think, I guess, isn't it? I guess, a kid watching a show would automatically think, I want to be on stage, I want to be in the spotlight, I want to be an actor, I want to be a dancer, I want to be a singer. But to think about the backstage element is a really, really interesting thing. So what was it, where did that kind of there from?
I'm not sure really. I mean, I genuinely never really wanted to do it. I mean, people in the business will say, after a few drinks, the stand-up comedian comes out to me, and that's probably they say that's what he's the tortured stand-up that never happened. That's not really quite true, because I couldn't do it. I just loved shows. I loved the idea of putting on shows and putting shows together and being in charge, I guess, and making decisions. And as I grew up and I started to see things and I started to see more, I could tell what was good and what was bad, or what was good and what wasn't as good. So I would go, oh, I know how to make that better. They shouldn't do that like that. They should do it like this. And that's how it started to happen, because I would see a lot. I educated myself on what good theatre and what bad theatre was, and then I came to London and I wanted to work in a theatre producer's office, and I happened to land in the office of a producer called David Pugh, who although David was producing all the kinds of things that I didn't want to do, because he would produce plays, there's nobody I know that doesn't have variety through them. It's like me. David will send me every day pictures of old playbills and posters and summer seasons and messages about I wish we'd been around then. And so that was an opportunity to be in a producer's office, see how things were put together, but talk about variety and talk about everything that I loved, and realise that there were other people out there that also liked it. And then that meant I could meet people that were connected to the business. So the great Edwin Shaw, who ran the Palladium box office, who met everybody from Josephine Baker to Liberace, pushed Judy Garland on stage. through David, I was able to kind of be around these people, and that was an education that is never going to be taught in a university or a drama college. You've just got to be there and in it and listen and ask questions. That's what I say to people now when they go, how do you watch? I say, just ask questions. Just, even if it's, how many feathers did Josephine Baker have coming out of a headdress, to how did you sell the tickets in those days when there was no box office and it was all seating plans with a marker pen, and one colour meant it was sold, and one colour meant it was reserved, and a different colour meant it was a concessionary ticket. Just ask the questions, and that became my education. And make mistakes along the way, get things wrong, put on shows that you shouldn't do. It's because there's no university course.
Do you know when you're putting on a show that you don't think is going to work, or is it always you always go in with the best intentions for everything?
Well, you always go in with the best intentions.
Yeah.
Sometimes things take you by surprise. Something, the biggest hits you can't plan for.
Yeah.
I remember, we co-produced Sunset Boulevard last year at the Savoy, and Jamie Lloyd had been talking to Nicole Scherzinger for a long time, and I got a message saying Jamie wants to do Sunset Boulevard with Nicole, and I said to Andrew and Madeline Lloyd Webber, I've had a message that Jamie wants to do this. Jamie's just done a Doll's House on Broadway, and there's no scenery and 2 plastic chairs. And it was Madeline that said, we could do with some shows like that, And we said, well, let's do it. And it became this extraordinary event that won 7 Oliviers and was that. But I wasn't planning it for years. It just, Jamie came along and said, I want to do this, and it happened. You can work on other things and be planning and thinking, and they can run with, very short time, but you always go in with the best intentions. I mean, in pantomime, I've had, when I did Snow White into the Birmingham Hippodrome years ago, we were filming a documentary for Channel 4. Gok Wan was making his pantomime debut. Stephanie Beecham was the Wicked Queen. John Partridge was red hot in EastEnders. He was playing the Prince. It was the first pantomime Matt Slack had been in Birmingham, where I'd seen him in Dartford the year before and thought, he should play the henchman. And then, 10 years on, he's now one of the biggest things in pantomime. Gary Wilmot was in the show. Paul Zerden was in the show. Anyway, we rehearsed the show, and we did the first performance, and it was absolutely terrible. It was probably the worst pantomime performance I've ever seen. I thought, I've lost it. I don't know how to do it anymore. It's awful. And I met somebody on the stairs who I said, did you enjoy it? And they kind of looked at me going, yes, through gritted teeth. And the matinee came down at about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I took the cast into the green room, and I gave 3 or 4 notes, and I made a couple of edits, and we went in at the 7 o'clock, and I've never seen a reaction to a pantomime like it. The roof came off. Wow. And it's just that very, very fine line. It's like what Ken could do with his act, and I ain't saying for 1 minute I have his ability, but it's just going right. If that comes out, that'll be stronger. That, edit that, move that around there, and it was a phenomenal night. But there's things that you learn along the way as you go, but always with the best of intentions.
Yeah. So, do you get thrilled by the prospect of, you're talking about doing Sunset Boulevard with Andrew Lloyd Webber and his wife. She says, we could do with a show like that. Does the idea of that, the risk of that, because it is a risk, because Sunset Boulevard traditionally is not that kind of show. Does the risk of that excite you, or is there a bit where you think, oh God, that's a really, really big risk?
The risk, no. I don't think risk excites anybody. I think, because it's really hard, especially at the moment. It is hard to make shows work, and the big shows cost millions and millions of pounds. Our Starlight Express, which is in previews, it's capitalised at £9 million. It's an extraordinary amount of money. So I don't get excited by the risk. You get excited by creating something that people want to see. So, I'm completely blown away that 10 years down the line, the day we put tickets on sale for the Palladium Pantomime, there can be 20,000 people in a queue at 9:30. That blows my mind. That something that we just said 10 years ago, let's give it a go, has grown and grown and grown, and despite the press not really liking it because they didn't get it at the beginning, they didn't get the style of show that we were trying to do, despite certain quarters of the industry turning their nose up, despite actually certain quarters of the pantomime industry turning their nose up. All that matters is what the public think. That excites me. That excites me. Even this year when we were going on sale with Robin Hood, I thought, well, Robin Hood's not one of the strongest titles in the world. It won't be Peter Pan. And we go on sale and it smashes every single record. That I find extraordinary. When we put Starlight Express on sale, the fact that so many people wanted to see it, that I find extraordinary. So you still got to get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
I've still got to sit in the, when we did on this Friday we'll do the Sitz Probe, the orchestra call for Hello Dolly. We got 21 pieces in the orchestra of Hello Dolly. And when those first few notes strike up, if that doesn't excite me, then I really shouldn't be doing it anymore.
Yeah.
But I still get excited when the pantomime orchestra strikes up. I still get excited when their orchestra are tuning up.
Yeah.
When you're walking in, I think you've got to still have all of that, because it's too hard otherwise.
Definitely.
You mentioned before about when you were younger and that you first came to London and you met David and he loved variety and you could really geek out with him about that. Had you not had that when you were younger then? Because something that we always get asked is variety still alive? Is it dead? Where are the comedians? Is the new people coming up? All of these questions. When you were young, did you feel that there was a community? Or did you feel that it was something that was of seasons past? Because your pantomimes are so rooted in variety. No one could come and see your pantomimes and not, even if they're not literate on variety, all the elements are there. So
Well, there was a lot of variety around. I mean, remember when I was a kid, you could go to Blackpool and you could see a big show at the Grand that Nick Thomas would be producing, and that could be the Comedy Bonanza with Cannon and Ball, Frank Carson, Johnny Casson, John Inman. There'd be that show there. You'd go onto the North Pier and you'd have Blackpool's biggest show, Roy Walker, Les Dennis, Sue Pollard. You go down to the South Pier and you'd have Rosie O'Grady's Music Hall, and it'd be Duncan Novell and Linda Nolan. There might be a musical in the Opera House, because that's how it would work then. Dougie Chapman would have the Winter Gardens Pavilion, and Danny would be there in Palladium Nights. I mean, that's before you'd hit the Pleasure Beach and all of the amazing shows that Amanda did. So I was around as a kid for the latter end of that. I wasn't there in the real glory days of it, and sadly I certainly wasn't around. I mean, had I been born 20 years earlier, I would probably have been producing summer shows. Mm-hmm. My life would have just been producing, Blackpool. And Nick would have somehow got me, and we would have been doing it together in Blackpool, as well as doing pantomime together. So that was always there. But there was a lot of touring shows when I was a kid. Dougie Chapman always went out with a Good Old Days of Music Hall. I mean, Danny was always out on the road, and I would go and see. I mean, if I saw Ken 40 times, I saw Danny 40 times.
Yeah.
So there was always that. There was always people touring one-nighters, and Little and Large would go out, and Cannon and Ball would go out, and the Crankies would go out, and the Grumbleweeds would go out. You'd go and see, and I'd go and see them all. So it was there, just not many 8 to 15-year-olds are in love with Ken Dodd and Danny LaRue. So there wasn't
which is unfortunate for the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It took coming to London to meet other like-minded people, but by then it was a bit gone. By then, things had moved on.
Yeah.
Time had moved on. Blackpool had closed shop. Blackpool had pretty much stopped doing what it was doing. I still now, Jack J produces a great show at the Hippodrome in Yarmouth, which my mate Johnny Mack's in, and I still go down every summer to the Hippodrome, and you get a little reminder of what it was like then. The variety acts that they bring in from around the world, the fact that they do it twice a day, never had a day off.
Yeah.
The merch stand going, the smell of the popcorn.
Yeah.
That's the last reminder, really, in this country of what those summer seasons were like. The magic, though, was if you sit with, for example, Alan Stewart, who does pantomime for us every year in Edinburgh. He's just playing the Wizard for us in The Wizard of Oz, and I was having dinner with him the other night with Craig Revel Horwood, because Craig's playing the Wicked Witch, and Craig was one of Danny LaRue's dancers in Australia, and Alan played pantomime quite a bit with Danny, which gives us the great line that Paul Elliott had when they did the dress rehearsal, and Danny thought Alan was in the show a little bit too much, and he had rather a little bit too much to do. And Paul rang Danny up and said, "How was the dress rehearsal last night?" And Danny's response was, "Too much wishy." And we use that now. If I think somebody's in somebody's gone on a little bit too long or is in it too much, I go, too much wishy.
Too much wishy. And how much then, when you're making your pantomimes, do you have to fight to keep all of the old variety? Because they're so based in varieties. Even the performers that you hire, you know, you've got your real classic, like I saw Brian Connolly last year. I mean, I've never seen such a masterclass actually in keeping an audience from the beginning to the end of the show. He was in every scene. He was definitely not too much wishy, but nearly there. And doing all of the old variety gags that, you know, like you say, some people might think are old-fashioned. 8 to 15-year-olds are not interested in that kind of stuff. How do you keep it going?
Well, this is total news to us, by the way, that 8 to 15-year-olds aren't into this, because we were like, aren't they?
But first of all, there's no such thing as old jokes to young children, because they haven't heard them before, for starters. I mean, yes, my pantomimes are full of variety, and again, they get criticised for that, because they'll say, oh, there's no story, or always makes me laugh, because Berwick, Kaler and York, you know, all those years, the most critically acclaimed pantomime in the land, Berwick would make a joke about it and say, there's no plot. We proudly talk about variety in our shows. That's what I say about London. If you don't like the fact that the Palladium is the home of variety, so it's a variety pantomime, if you don't want to see a variety pantomime, don't come to the Palladium. The great thing is, you can go down to Hackney, you can go to the Lyric Hammersmith. There's plenty of opportunities to see more narrative-based pantomimes, more story-based pantomimes, more magical fairy tales. We are proudly saying, no, somebody is going to do their thing now.
Yeah.
You know, I book a ventriloquist every year because that's what I want, and it's what I think the audience want. I booked the comic to deliver the innuendo because that works well to the ventriloquist for the audience.
Yeah.
The actor, the legit actor, who is having the mick taking him out of himself every year, you know, putting all of those things together, that's variety.
Yeah.
That's what makes it what it is. So, you know, we unashamedly do variety routines in our shows. And you know, Brian Connolly's Cinderella is one of the... That show's been around longer than probably any other pantomime. It's so successful. Every theatre in the land wants it. And it moves and it moves and it moves. And yes, Buttons is perhaps in it more than Cinderella is, but why is it the most successful? Why is it the one? You know, in Newcastle with Clive and Danny, it's a variety show. It's a variety show that is hanging on the hook of a pantomime title, sells more tickets than, you know, any other theatre of its size regionally in the land. I think people. The thing that's happened with variety is if you go back to the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, certainly when television came along, most certainly in the 70s and going into the 80s, if you were a big Saturday night TV star, you had a Saturday night TV show, you went and you did your summer season, and then you went and did your pantomime.
Yeah. And
if you were lucky, you did the Opera House in Blackpool as your summer season, because it was 3,000 seats, and that proved how big a star you were. And at Christmas, you do the Palladium. And if you weren't doing the Palladium, you'd be doing Manchester or you'd be doing Birmingham. But you had a Saturday night TV show. Now, if you've got a Saturday night TV show, you do the O2. And that's it. And you don't do summer seasons because they don't exist. And God forbid you don't do a pantomime. You know, nobody that can go and stand with one mic and play to 20,000 people at the O2 is going to go through the hassle of twice a day for 6 weeks at Christmas. And I kind of get it, but it's a shame.
Yeah.
It's a real shame as well, because the craft of a pantomime and that intimacy with the audience, we're talking about Ken Dodd, something that he was so good at, is not the same in an arena. The thing that you have, and the Palladium, I mean, all those Frank Matcham theatres are just stunning, aren't they? Because you feel like when you're on stage, like the audience are there, they're giving you a hug, and you can connect with them, and you can't get that at the O2, you can't get that in Manchester arena. So they don't learn, do they, that sort of, like what Ken called it, that invisible thread between the audience, and I think that's integral to pantomime.
Yeah, I mean, it is a shame. You know, people are always surprised that the Palladium stage is so small, and I say, but remember, it's not a theatre; it's a music hall. It was built as a music hall, which is why you can have one person stand there and you can feel incredibly close to them. That's why, you know, when we're about to open Hello Dolly there, you know, Imelda, you know, smaller lady, the power is going to be huge because that front row of the circle is so close. And it is a shame, but things move on and time moves on. I this weekend, I was catching up on things, and I watched Are You Being Served, the movie. And I was laughing out loud in the first few minutes of that, you know. You couldn't do that today.
Yeah.
Nobody would ever do that today.
Yeah.
But there it was on, and I laughed out loud. I can't actually remember the last time I've laughed out loud on a TV sitcom.
Yeah.
You know, not since the first series of Mrs. Brown, probably, when we were all going, oh my God, who is this?
Yeah.
The world just changes. The world just moves on very, very quickly. And that doesn't work for variety anymore. Variety is just different. We think it's Britain's Got Talent, but it's not, because the Britain's Got Talent stars don't really continue in the way that it was if you won Opportunity Knocks or you won New Faces, because you would get a TV show out of it. Or if you made, I mean, the great story about the Crankies when they would delf on surprise on the Royal Variety Show, and Ian tells a wonderful story about they weren't billed, they came down, they did the show, and they were told by the camera, by the director, don't look in the camera, don't look at the roll box, you mustn't look at the Queen. And the Crankies' opening act for a long time was, Jimmy, I'm looking for me mam. Where's me mam? And Jimmy comes in looking for me mam, and Jeanette, you can watch it, it's on YouTube, and Jeanette's eye catches the roll box, and the roof came off, and they tell the story that they absolutely stormed it, and you watch the clip, they really, really do storm that night. And they went to their hotel, they spent all their money on hotel in London, and they go to bed, and they wake up in the morning, the phone's ringing, and they answer the phone with a bit of a headache, and I forget which newspaper it was, I think it was The Sun, and there was a journalist from The Sun, and said, good morning, Mr. Cranky, how does it feel to wake up a star? Because that's what you could do then. You could go on a TV show that was live that night, and suddenly the nation knew, nothing was pre-recorded, the nation knew who you were. And I think I'm right in saying they didn't have the money to get from the hotel to the station, so they dragged their suitcase across London, and as they were driving past, a taxi driver tooted and said, "Wee Jimmy, have you found your mum?"
Wow.
That'd never happen now.
No.
That's how things have changed.
We're so much more divided, aren't we, in our entertainment? But then pantomime is the time of year where everybody comes together, all different generations, and it's often the only thing that a family might do together, and especially theatre-wise. What's left for you in terms of pushing the pantomime craft? You know, in terms of how do you think I'm going to keep going?
Well, it's all about the talent. You know, it's all about, can you make an audience laugh? That's my big fear, is always wherever it is, who is going to make the audience laugh? And, you know, people will say, oh, there's nobody coming through. Mm-hmm. Well, that's wrong. Yeah. Because, you know, Danny Adams is only in his 40s. Johnny Mack's only in his 40s. Ben Nicholas is only in his 40s. You know, there's many people that are working at it and can hold an audience in the way that they can. So it's still there. We've still got to look after it and make sure there's a few more, because, you know, we need more than 3. But that is
they won't say that.
They
They're
won't
like,
say
no,
that.
we can do it all.
And there's other people. There's great new events like Max Fulham coming through. There's great Scottish performers like Jordan Young. But it's hard, and even there's, don't get me wrong, there's a great round of talent in their 50s. I mean, you know, Matt Slack can be at the Birmingham Hippodrome for as long as he wants. But that talent is the. You can always give the shows fabulous scenery, great costumes, special effects, but if there's nobody there grabbing the audience, it's like when I introduced Rob Madge to the Palladium 2 years ago. I just saw this glimmer of something that I can look and I can go, oh, there's somebody there that the Palladium audience within 5 years' time will really have latched onto, and can hopefully sending it all marching forward when the rest of us have, either been thrown out or decided that enough's enough.
Well, I do panto comic, Michael, so I can say we do need more than 3.
What is it when you are looking for performers to come through, like you say, because you have to invest a lot in them, like you say, like it's because those people that you've mentioned, they've been doing it a long time, so you have to invest in people, and like Rob Madge, long term. What is it? What's that? Without using the word X factor, what is that you're looking for that you can see? They're not there now, but they will be.
I like people. Well, I think the best pantomime performers, the best comics are people who are just an extension of themselves. I don't like people who come on and put a funny voice on. I don't like people that come on and pull funny faces. The best people I know are actually very, very similar off stage to the way that they are on. So, you know, Brian is just Brian. You know, he's one thing in the dressing room, and he just pushes that Brian Connolly persona a little bit more when he's on. Pasquale's exactly the same. Julian is, you know, a slightly edgier version of the man that you have dinner with after the show. They're the best people. They're the people that, because it's got to be real, and I think the audiences see through it if it's not real.
Ben Nicholas is, I think, one of the most natural performers in that he just sometimes, and I know Ben, so I mean this in a nice way, he's just stood there and it looks like he's not doing anything because he's so relaxed, and yet he just will make a gesture or a look with his hand and bring 3,000 people like to his, it just draws all the attention on him just from a gesture. And I think, like you say, that's because it's an extension of him and it's authentic, that relaxation. But that's so hard to learn, isn't it?
Well, you can't teach it. That's the thing. And you know, the old saying, you either got it or you ain't. It's somewhere up there, over the Melda Staunton and Gypsy on the wall. You either got it or you ain't, and you can't teach it. You can make people better. I've seen people that grow across years, and you know, sometimes people work for us and it doesn't quite work, and then they go away and they come back and they're better, they're all the better for it. But you can't teach it. It's just either in there or it's not.
You should, I'm like a magpie now, distracted by these posters, Michael. You did the wrong thing by putting them out because I'm just so so lost in them. Oh,
do you approach producing a musical different to pantomime?
Not really. I mean, I think I've tried to, certainly in the latter years, I've tried to approach producing pantomime like musicals, and just making them a bit better, you know, upgrading the production values. You know, I think kind of when I came along on the scene, it was when the Twins came along, so we really pushed kind of the special effects. Original musical scores, you know, tend to be quite important alongside parodies and songs that the audience know. I don't go, oh, that's a pantomime, so I'll produce it that way. That's a musical, I'll produce it that way. It's just producing shows to me.
I mean, with the reputation and the repertoire of actors that you've built up working with, I mean, Paul O'Grady, Julian Clary, French and Saunders, these are big names. So obviously there must be other big names that really want to work in your shows and in your pantos. How do you sort of work out who is right to fit in and who isn't right to fit in?
Well, funny enough, there's not a, you know, I think this is a bit of a myth. There's not a long list of people that want to do pantomime.
Right.
I think everybody thinks that, oh, because it's the Palladium, say, it's easy to cast, and it really, really isn't. What I would say is, if you look at in the past 10 years, everybody comes back.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that they come back says it all. You know, O'Grady did it and said to me, I'm never doing this again. And then he came back. Dawn French did it, and then she came back. Ashley Banjo I introduced into pantomime, and Ashley and Diversity have done it every year since. Beverly Knight has done it twice for me. You know, people do. I'm sure Jennifer Saunders will do another one.
I hope so.
And I think.
And let's not forget Nigel Havers.
Well, some of us try to forget Nigel Havers. But I think that says it all. Jane McDonald, I did pantomime with Jane McDonald 10 years ago in Birmingham, and it's taken me 10 years to get Jane to do it again. So it's not as if there's, you know, you think what Ian McKellen did for pantomime and what the Palladium's done for pantomime, you'd think would change it, and it hasn't really.
Yeah.
It's still a little bit of a dirty word, and it's hard.
I was going to say that it's
hard
hard
work.
work.
I had
Really
one
is hard
very,
work.
very, very famous British actress who came to see the show and absolutely loved it. And she said, "Darling, I would love to do this." And I said, "Well, fantastic, fantastic. You could do next year." She said, "I'd love to. Does it have to be on at Christmas?" And that's the thing. People don't like giving up their Christmases.
And she was a Brit. So
Yeah,
she knew.
some people do like Julian will openly say he don't really want to be part of other people's Christmas like that. He wants to be in the theatre and giving joy to the audience. So, but it's a big commitment twice a day.
And it's hard. There's nowhere to hide, is there? There's no. If you get an ad lib, if you get a something in from the audience, there is nowhere to hide as a performer, and I think it's terrifying for people.
Major film star, like one of the biggest you can get, comes and sees it and says, "I want to do it desperately, but there's a problem." And I said, "What?" He said, "They are all playing themselves." And I'd be terrified to be me, because this actor is used to hiding behind the persona of somebody else, behind a character, and he got straight away that Julian's just Julian and Nigel's Nigel. I mean, half the time they call each other, whoever they play, they call each other by their own names.
Yeah. So we've just mentioned so many fantastic performers that you're working with currently. Who are some of your, apart from Ken obviously we've spoken about, who are some of your all-time favourite variety performers, even if you didn't see them?
Oh, well, right up there was Danny LaRue. There's a picture of him somewhere. It was over there. I don't know where it's behind me. Danny was magic. Danny had a magic that,
I see him.
somewhere
He's
there,
over there.
next to Stanley Baxter.
Yeah.
That drag now is, the younger generation think that they own drag.
Yeah, like they reinvented it, yeah.
And, look what Danny did, really, it's an awful term, respectable, but he really did bring it into the homes of the family audience and could go to Blackpool and play, take what was a London act. I mean, remember that the one of the brilliant things about Danny was that he really didn't become a star through television. He rarely did television shows.
Yeah.
He would have the odd television special, but he never had a long-running Danny LaRue show on BBC or ITV. It was really the live work that made him a star. And 2 years at the Palace Theatre in his own West End show, one of the old managers said to me, I said, "What's the biggest hit you've ever worked on?" This is somebody that had been, worked on Mamma Mia and all the great British musicals that came out in the 80s and 90s. And they said, "Oh, Danny at the Palace." Yeah. And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because we sold doubles." I'd never heard of this before. I said, "What's a double?" And they said, "In the gallery, you'd sell a seat twice. So a man would buy the seat, pay for another ticket, and his girlfriend or his wife would sit on his knee and watch the show." It was, he was so popular. But it was a very, it was a London act. The clubs that he did, Irving's, obviously Danny's at Hanover Square, but then he was able to take it out to a mass audience in Blackpool and pantomime, and like Ken, was absolutely in love with the stage and performing, and was put on the planet to be Danny LaRue. That's what he was there for. And
also because it was a time before YouTube and DVDs or anything, the only opportunity that people would get to see these people was if you went to see them live.
And Danny was a curiosity really, because he never looked like the women that he impersonated.
Yeah.
He didn't sound like the women that he impersonated. And I wouldn't say he was hysterically funny. There was a great wit there, and there were great one-liners and innuendo, but there was a magic about Danny that Danny was an artist that you were excited about before he came on.
Yeah.
Like when you do an announcement for somebody and you know that they're coming, you could feel it in the audience. And he was just unique, and there've been others that have come along, but never really managed to capture that in the way that Danny did. So he was always a big favourite.
And Stanley Baxter, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I never saw Stanley live, actually. I just, was very involved in Scottish pantomime. I did the first ever big pantomime that I directed at the King's in Glasgow. So somebody set up a lunch for me, which is what that photograph behind me you can see. That was a thrill to sit there with Stanley. And he took a little while to warm up for me at the lunch, but once we got going and, he told me some brilliant things about how successful he was in the Glasgow and Edinburgh pantomimes. And then the management thought that they would move him to Manchester. And he went to Manchester in Jack and the Beanstalk, which I think he said was his least favourite title. And they made him do it not in a Scottish accent, and how that didn't work for him.
Right. Which is what you just said about being yourself.
Yeah. Just being yourself, just being an extension of yourself. So, I although I never saw him live, that's a great regret. But again, the thing is, Stanley packed up very early. Stanley packed in at the top. The TV series finished. He was still the biggest star in Scottish pantomime, and he went goodbye, and that was it. So the memory for those that saw him was of this phenomenal star who looked immaculate in the costumes and was with it and was sharp, and that's that can be a good way to go.
Yeah. You put in, I don't know if this was you personally, but in the Palladium Panto programme, you had the whole section on Mary Lloyd. Why was that important for you to remind an audience that she existed? A lot of people will maybe never even have heard of her.
Well, I think I'm a great believer in you can only look forward if you're able to look back. You can only look forward in your career, in the business, in decisions that you make if you know what went before. There was a drag performer came to see me, young 20-something, and I said, "Oh, what do you think of Hinge and Bracket?" And he looked at me blank, and I went, "Danny LaRue?" And he looked at me vague. I went, "You've got to know Barry Humphries." And he went, "Dame Edna," and he got Dame Edna. And I said, "Look, you've got to go and look at all of these clips of all of these people just to inform your act." It's like, as a producer, I look at what Cameron did in his early days. I look at Bernard Delfont. You look at David Merrick in America. I just think you've got to know what happened before, and I think it's important that some people aren't forgotten. I think that's why when you can in a programme, when you can write about anybody from a Mary Lloyd, a Vesta Tilley, Dan Leno, Dan Leno in the history of Drury Lane.
Well, I was thinking that when you were talking about the pantos before not having a plot, the way they rehearsed them at Drury Lane, there's no way they had a plot. There's no way. They were just really a spot show, and they went on for hours. And
I think there's a great... It's all a myth, the way people talk about, it's not what it was. When Frank Bruno was doing pantomime and people would criticise having a boxer, there was boxers and sportsmen in the pantomimes at Drury Lane. They would recreate the Grand National on stage. It's a snobbishness from... dare I say it, and you might edit this out, it's a snobbishness from so-called, I call them self-proclaimed experts, that they tell us this is the way it should be. And you go, how do you know? You weren't there. Yeah. You weren't there when Dan Leno and Herbert Campbell were playing the Babes in the Wood. Mm-hmm. You weren't there when Augustus Harris was running Drury Lane, or in the meetings and the conversations when they said we're going to have fountains and God knows whatever the equivalent was of the things that we do today. Yeah. None of us saw them. Yeah. That's the thing. So nobody can say this is the way it should be, because the great thing about pantomime is it should just be the way it is. Mm-hmm. And you can have pantomime in a back room with 5 people, or on stage at the London Palladium, and everything in between. And it's like in the Northeast, we're very lucky in that we've got a lot of pantomime in the Northeast. I always say at Christmas, you can come and see the Theatre Royal Pantomime, which I'd like to think is the jewel in the crown. But there's a brilliant pantomime that Ray Spencer does at the Customs House in South Shields.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one.
And then everything in between. Good pantomime at the time. They're doing good stuff at the Empire now. It's just what it is. It's just there's a lot of it, and they're all different. But it doesn't mean one's right and one's wrong.
So Michael Harrison, you must have seen and been and visited and spent a lot of time in a lot of the biggest theatres in the country, some of the most special theatres. What sticks out to you, although it seems like it might be an obvious answer, as one of your favourite venues?
That's really hard because I've got lots of reasons for liking lots of theatres.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've got a very long association with Newcastle Theatre Royal.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from a pandemic, I think I've produced and directed 19 consecutive pantomimes in that theatre. So that's obviously incredibly special. I think I'm on year 13, 14 at Birmingham Hippodrome. I've got a big love affair with the Kings in Glasgow because it's the first pantomime that I ever directed, and Glasgow's always been a very lucky city to me. A big association with the Kings in Edinburgh because I was at university there, so I saw an awful lot of theatre at the Kings. There are other theatres around the country that I just love going to that perhaps I haven't got as big an association as you might think. I love sitting in Manchester Opera House on a Saturday night watching the pantomime there.
Yeah.
It's an electric atmosphere. But I suppose, you know, the great passion and privilege has been that theatre on Argyle Street, you know, the London Palladium, which happens to be the most famous theatre in the world.
Yeah.
And there's just a magic about it, and I would happily stand at the back of those stalls and watch an audience react for the rest of my life if I could. In fact, I think I would pay to be there, but don't tell the Lloyd Webbers that. You know, it's just, I feel very, very lucky that I've had my time there, and it won't last forever. I'm sure it won't last forever. We're only there for a moment in time, and then somebody else will come along with, hopefully, with bigger and better ideas, and things will move on. But I've had 10. Well, this is the 9th year in pantomime, but I've had, you know, 2 seasons of Joseph there. One which was through a terrible period in COVID, which I'm still thrilled we managed to get on, even we were playing to a socially distanced audience. At the Wizard of Oz there, we're about to do Hello Dolly there. I'm going to do the musical there next year, but it won't last forever. So every time, and this is not a word of a lie, every time I walk through that stage door, even when I'm directing and I'm popping out to get a sandwich and I'm walking back, every time I walk under that doorway and beat myself in, it feels special. Every time I walk up through that corridor, and I rarely go in through the front because it's just easier to pop in through the stage door, but I always walk around to just have a look. I just go and look at it. And the other night I was having a meal on that side of town, and I walked back the long way around to just walk past the Palladium, and I just stood outside and had a look. And when you've got that feeling for a building, then it's really, really special.
And that's why you're the one that should be doing it.
Yeah.
Because of the way
you have that feeling.
You've just spoke about it in that way, and like you said before, the minute you stop feeling like that, maybe is when you stop doing it. But the fact that you still feel like that is why the Lloyd Webbers know it's in such safe.
I hope so. I mean, it's you know, it has been a privilege. I remember being a little boy and seeing Barry Humphries and Oliver there, and I would never have thought that I would be then, you know, the producer of these summer and particularly the Christmas shows. It comes with a pressure. There's a pressure in the Palladium that is like nothing else.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Even producing Starlight Express, which is huge out at Wembley, doesn't come with the same pressure that it does, because you don't want to get it wrong in the Palladium. That's the thing.
Yes.
You don't want to get it wrong. But in the main, I think we've got it right, and I hope to be there for a few more years to come. I've got a few more ideas for the future. But
I hope you are.
It's a special place.
You better be. And they can name a bar after you, like Val Parnell.
Well, I have a funny feeling it'll just be a toilet.
Don't say that. What I love though about your answer, and I think as people that are, you know, all of us here, we're not originally from London. Thank you for mentioning so many amazing regional theatres, because often we get a lot of London theatres when we ask that question, because obviously they're fabulous. But something that you, and obviously the passion is that your pantos regionally are just as good. Yes, the Palladium has that sparkle. But you do not have to come to London to see a pantomime of the scale of the Palladium. You deliver that all over the country.
Well, the great thing about what the Palladium's done actually is be able to feed the regions, because you couldn't afford to build the shows regionally like we can at the Palladium.
Yeah.
But, you know, this Christmas, you'll go to Birmingham and you'll see a Palladium set on that stage. You'll go to Southampton, you'll see a Palladium set on that stage. You'll go to Plymouth, you'll see a Palladium set on that stage. You'll go to Edinburgh, you'll see a Palladium set on that stage. You'll go to Stoke-on-Trent, you'll see the Dick Whittington Palladium, the Olivia Award-winning Dick Whittington, on the Palladium stage. So that is one of the great things that is happening, that we're feeding the regions in a way that hasn't been... I mean, the financial investment in pantomime has just gone through the roof. Because I'm not just talking about sets, I'm talking about costumes, I'm talking about music, I'm talking about ideas that is really getting out there for the regions. And I'm particularly proud of that. I mean, I sat in Nottingham Theatre Hall last Christmas, another favourite of mine, and saw the Palladium Dick Whittington shrunk down from the width of the Palladium onto the stage of Nottingham, and it was fantastic to see. And the thing is, everybody kind of knows. They don't know why it's different. It just feels better.
Yeah.
It just has an edge to it.
And you don't know which other little new Michael Harrisons are sat in Stoke-on-Trent or in Birmingham that are going to see those and be inspired because they're seeing it with their granddad with the vein popping out their head.
Yeah.
And that's a different thing when you have to slip into London and be here,
Yeah.
So I think that's just an amazing thing that you're doing. I mean, that crocodile in Manchester, was that last year?
Yeah, before.
My God. That was like, that was like I was in Vegas when that came out, and then you just step out the theatre and you're in the middle of Manchester.
Yeah.
Like, I think the fact that that you're able to do that is just fantastic, and I think for us that we've got kids like in the regions, like I think that's fantastic that you can point them in that direction and say you don't need to come to the Palladium, but go if you can.
Is anything possible now, Michael? Is there anything that anyone ever pictures when you're putting together pantos and go, oh no, we can't do that?
Oh, I get told no all the time. That's my big bugbear. No.
Can we resurrect Danny LaRue?
Look, the building. The thing is, the buildings have the limitations. The Palladium is a Victorian building.
Yeah.
There's
but you put a giant beanstalk up the middle of it and flew Julian Clary out.
There's plaster. Wait to see what we're doing this year. There's plaster work to be careful of, and so and also there's time.
Yeah.
Time to get it on. I think what some people don't realise is most major West End musicals, including the ones I produce, have about a 2-week tech period. At the Palladium, I start the tech at 2:30 on a Tuesday, and we open at 2:30 on a Saturday, with probably one of the most complicated, physical productions, and with all the effects and everything in the West End. So you can only do so much. And I keep saying to everybody here and at the theatre, if the shows are going to get bigger, which they are every year, we're just going to need more time, because there's only so many hours in the tech session that you can make these things happen.
And that's another thing that probably puts actors off, isn't it? Because they're used to that time, and you're saying, can you just do this in a few days, please?
That's right, yeah.
So, talent aside, okay, if you could be any variety act, what would you be? You could just wake up with a God-given talent.
Well,
tomorrow.
I always used to say because he's one of my closest friends, I always used to say, when I come back, I'm coming back as Paul Zerden, because he has a puppet in a bag, and he carries the bag, and he goes in and he stands at the mic and he does it, and he seems to get lots of laughs, a lot of money, and has a very nice life.
What would your puppet be?
Well, no, Dickie Mint.
Oh,
Because I probably would have. If it go back to Ken Dodd, isn't it? If you could have been anybody, you'd want to be the best. You want to be the best at what you do, and he was the best at what he did. And I think I would have wanted to have been Ken. I think I still can't think of anybody else that even comes close to doing what he did over the length of time that he did it, in the various disciplines. I mean, there is one interesting thing that I think, to be a comedian and then reinvent yourself. I was thinking about this the other day. To reinvent yourself, or just have a career alongside as a singer, but really make it big in the charts. I mean, remember, these weren't little records that he did. Songs like Tears were big hits.
Yeah.
And I liken it a little bit to when I was interviewed when Paul O'Grady passed away. And I said, one of the things I said about Paul was, I said, you know, Paul was so clever that he made Lily Savage a huge star, and then was able to go, no, I'm stopping that now, goodbye, and kind of resurrect himself as Paul and be even bigger. That's huge.
Yeah.
And I can only really think of Paul and Ken who managed to do that. They're both from Liverpool. I don't know what that says, but
a lot actually.
I'm sure. I don't know what that says about, you know, those clever comedy minds. I think there's also something in that, you know, they both kind of self-managed themselves.
Yeah.
You know, it was either themselves or done within a very close-knit circle.
And usually with loved ones as well.
And that it was about characters. You know, Lily was a character, and Dickie Mint was a character, and the Diddy Men were characters, and everything that the world that went with Lily, be it you know, Vera and all of that wonderful backstory that she had, and then the Jam Buddy Minds with Ken. And I don't know, and I just was thinking about that the other day, and I thought, oh, there's a bit of a link there.
Yeah.
That you don't really see. I should also say, because I would hate it if I didn't, that I was a huge Barry Humphries fan.
Oh yeah.
And I did see Edna many times, and also only about 6 months before he died, I had a sit down with Barry, and he said to me, I had some costume sketches on my phone for Julian at the Palladium, and he asked to have a look at them, and I showed him, and he said a line that lived with me forever. He said, "You're the only wonder left in the West End." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, nobody else is doing this." I mean, he loved Julian. He was a huge fan of Julian. He said, "Please tell Julian how much I rate him." And I went running to the toilet in Andrew Lloyd Webber's house and rang Julian. Julian, Barry Humphries just says he's a big fan. And he was extraordinary. I mean, he was, again, look at these people. Look at Ken coming from that, you know, very much working class background that he did to becoming the comic that he did. Look at Danny being brought over from Ireland, evacuated during the war, growing up in, you know, St. Patrick's Church, Soho Square. Look at Barry coming from Australia, bringing an Australian housewife character to the very height, you know, mixing with royalty and, again, long-running West End shows. You know, Ken's 42 weeks at the Palladium, Danny's 2 years at the Palace, the numerous Dame Edna shows. I don't see any comics doing that today. No. Nobody's doing that anymore.
Who should we have our eye on?
I think probably the people that I mentioned, you know. I think my worry for them is that the world's changed, that it ends up passing them by. I worry that, you know, that there's not a prime time television slot for the kind of comedy that we love. It baffles me that 90,000 people can go and see Danny Adams in Newcastle and roll about twice a day, but there's not a Saturday night TV show that brings these kind of people together. I think, you know, those people that are now headlining those shows, Jason Manford's the closest to it. You know, I take my hat off to Jason. Jason could have been very snobby, but Jason's got variety and musical theatre in his soul, which is why he'll do a Wizard of Oz, or he'll do a pantomime, as well as a TV drama, as well as going out, you know, he's playing the new big arena in Manchester, but they're few and far between.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you need to get that Barry Humphries quote on some kind of sign over the door, like as you come into the office.
It was a really lovely thing for it. And it was a surprise when I met him. It was a surprise that they'd set up for him to come in and have a drink with me, and he walked. I was really starstruck when I saw him there, and he was brilliant. What he did with Edna was extraordinary.
It's the intelligence, I think, because I think it's very easy to watch those things and think that they're easy, that it's silly, that it's childish, you know. But like we were saying with Ken's Notebooks and Barry Humphries, I mean, we were listening to his Desert Island Discs, weren't we, the other day? This is how we pass our days. And he said he collects the old antique books, and he reads all these books. And I think people don't realise how intelligent these people are, and that's about reinventing.
Barry was a real intellect, like Ken, a real intellect. Very, very, very well read.
Well, should we do our quick fire round?
Let's do it.
Which iconic prop would you rather display in your house? Orville the Duck or Tommy Cooper's fez?
Oh, but I can't. I've got to tell you one thing before this.
One or the other.
I'm going to tell you this.
Don't tell us you've got both.
No, but I have an art collection which people walk, and it's Keith Harrison Orville with Cuddles. This is paint. I've had these painter has done all the. I've got portraits.
I love it. It's Cuddles as well.
I know.
Cuddles, Tommy in the Fez, Frankie Howard, the Crankies, John Inman, Ken, Danny, Barry Humphries, Hinge and Brackett, and Stanley Baxter. So it's really hard because I've actually got both of those displayed in my house.
And is that something you've had commissioned?
Well, what happened was, sorry, I should have answered your question.
No.
This is great.
I was in Brighton, and I was walking along the pier, and there was an artist's shop, and there was a painting of Ken as the Laughing Cavalier.
Oh,
and good. I went up to the artist and I said, I need to buy that, and I bought it. And he said, I said, do you do commissions? And he said, yes. So I had Danny done, and he did it for me. Danny at the Palladium, they're holding a glass of pink champagne, and then I got addicted, so I got all of those done. I've had to stop because I've got no wall space. But I've got them all. I might do a few more.
You need to extend into another room.
Anyway, so I've got
your
both of those.
Her
but if I had to display one, I'd put Cooper's Fez.
Cooper's Fez.
Cooper's Fez, lovely. Which Dane named Danny would you rather direct in Panto? Would you rather have directed Dan Leno or Danny LaRue?
Danny LaRue.
Who would you rather take out to lunch, Mary Lloyd or Joyce Grenfell?
Oh, Joyce Grenfell.
Would you rather attend the Princess Ball or climb Jack's Beanstalk?
Climb the Beanstalk any day.
Are you a press night partier or a stage door sneak out?
A stage door sneak out.
I've seen you though do a lovely speech
in my own
in your own party.
Yeah, but every other night off you go.
That was an amazing speech, and that was one of the reasons why we really wanted to interview you, because
might have been a few glasses of Malbec that helped that speech.
I'd probably had a few myself. So
if you could only have one in a panto, would you rather have the Ghost Gag or 12 Days of Christmas?
12 Days of Christmas.
Who would you rather play, King Rat or Captain Hook?
Captain Hook.
And would you rather be sitting in the audience or waiting in the wings?
Sitting in the audience.
Have you ever performed?
Yes.
Is it on camera? Do we have footage?
There was trepidation there, Michael.
Unfortunately, some of the materials might be in the hands of a Danny Adams or something like that, who will use it against me in the years to come.
Can I just say, I wish that this interview had been a visual, because as you were talking about really wanting a puppet, I could just see Pinocchio over your shoulder. This ominous presence in the background. Well, thank you so much. It's been a true honour, and we're so pleased to just have had a small slice of your time.
And thank you for keeping variety alive, because we love it, and what we know, the more we do these things, is that there is more of us than you think.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
What a special morning we had. It was such a treat to get to talk to Michael. And now I feel like you've waited all this time for Maria's teaser that she dropped at the start of the episode about what was that special object in Michael Harrison's office. Well, as you heard in the interview, Michael had the most beautiful wooden statue of Pinocchio in his office. And it was beautifully carved. It was absolutely stunning. And it just caught my eye the whole way through. It just seemed like such a unique piece. And there was something so innocent, but so magical about it. It was really, really stunning. Anyway, after we finished the interview, we went for a little mooch around Covent Garden. We were really buzzed and high on life from our fantastic interview. Michael was so nice, and it was so lovely that we wanted to kind of carry on the party. So we went for lunch in Covent Garden. As we did, we were mooching around the market. And there, hanging up in Covent Garden Market, screaming my name, was a little wooden statue of Pinocchio. It was perfect. It seemed like the hand of fate was looking down on us. So, of course, I bought it, and Pinocchio is proudly displayed in my house right now.
As if Mike's ever needed his arm twisting buying anything in a market on a stall where you've got to barter for the price. But I think what was so special was that it just wasn't the Disney. It's not like a rubbery, plasticky toy, is it?
No, it's a real wooden marionette, and it's got the strings on and everything. And the lady that sold it to us told us apparently that Pinocchio dolls are a sign of good luck.
So there you go. We're blessed. Blessed all round.
But then I just kind of dived in and bought it, and then Maria said, actually, if you hadn't bought it, I would have done. So I feel like I nabbed it.
It's all right. The look will spread to us both.
But then we said we could share it, couldn't we? Like a joint custody thing. You have it Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and I have it the rest of the week.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to that episode. We hope that you learn a lot about a different side of panto and a different side of theatre. We love chatting to performers and we love chatting to the directors, but it's always really nice to talk to people who are making it happen in a completely different way. And if anyone's making it happen, it's Michael Harrison.
He certainly is. If you've got a favourite show, a favourite musical, or a favourite panto that Michael has produced, let us know. Have your say. Get in touch with us on our SpeakPipe, www.speakpipe.com/Twice Nightly the podcast. Also, make sure you give us a like, give us a follow, and give us a subscribe on all of our social media platforms. And make sure that you like, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps us to reach a broader audience, and it helps us to spread that variety love and keep that community growing. All that's left for us to say is
see you next week.
What does Tommy Cooper say?
Just like that.